All right, in this chapter 46, we're going to cover the major ecosystems of the biosphere. In this chapter, we will be going over the terrestrial ecosystems and the aquatic ecosystems. So starting off, we're going to start off by defining just a couple of key terms in this class. So the major terrestrial ecosystems that are characterized by their specific climate and geography are going to be called biomes. Climate is the prevailing weather conditions in a particular region, which is going to be dictated by two major factors: temperature and precipitation, or rainfall. Each biome is going to have a mix of plants and animals that are adapted to living within the parameters of the environmental conditions within a given region. So for example, you don't tend to find palm trees in northern icy climates. You find coniferous trees that have adapted to live in the frozen regions of the world where there's very little sunlight. And we'll see that types of biome tend to repeat in any region where the temperature and the precipitation are the same. So here's a diagram that kind of shows the various biomes based on temperature and precipitation. So here we have temperature going down as we go up the graph. So as we go up, the temperature is decreasing. And as we go to the right, we're going to see rainfall, or precipitation is increasing. So over here in the very, very sort of warm regions, pardon me, I've got the hiccups. In the warm regions that have very little rainfall, we're going to see, desert or semi-desert regions. As we start to, get just a little bit wetter, we're going to see the savanna. The savanna and thorn scrub area is going to have very high temperatures and very little precipitation. If we keep that same amount of precipitation but just cool down a little bit in temperature, we're going to see grassland with shrubland on the slightly drier side of things and the woodland on the slightly wetter side of things. If we increase in temperature and increase in rainfall, we're going to see tropical season forests, and then finally tropical rainforests at the really high end of precipitation. Temperate rainforests are going to be at the high end of precipitation, but at slightly cooler temperatures. Temperate deciduous forests are going to be completely smack dab in the middle, sort of an average annual precipitation and sort of an average temperature as well. Now the taiga is going to have more rain than, the deserts or the semi-deserts, but it's also going to be significantly colder than like the temperate deciduous forests. And then finally the tundra, the frozen region, is going to have pretty low precipitation and very, very cold temperature. So anyway, this is a really awesome diagram. I enjoy it very much. I think it does a really good job of explaining the various types of biomes, and you will most certainly see a question somewhere, either as a pop quiz or on your final exam or maybe on your homework, where I'm going to ask you to pick and describe a particular biome. I'm going to ask you to talk about the temperature, or I'm going to ask you to talk about the climate and the producers, the primary consumers, the secondary consumers, and I'm going to ask you to kind of talk about your own biome and kind of explain all of those different factors about it. So this is a really great place for you to start when you're looking at the various climates of the different biomes. This diagram I think is also pretty cool. This is a map of the world that shows the distribution of the biomes. You'll notice that biomes are not continent specific. We don't find tropical rainforests only in certain continents. What we see is that it varies based on sort of latitude, where it is in relation to the equator. You'll tend to find the warmer tropical climates, wetter tropical climates near the equator, the cooler, drier climates near the poles. In fact, if you were traveling from the equator to the North Pole, you would observe tropical rainforest, followed by temperate deciduous forest, followed by coniferous forest, and then finally the frozen tundra. A very similar sequence is actually seen if you are ascending a mountain. So if you were looking even in sort of a tropical rainforest area, if there is high mountains found in that region of the tropical rainforest, you will see tropical rainforest near the base, deciduous forest as you climb, then a montane coniferous forest, finally the alpine tundra, and then a frozen tundra at the summit of that particular mountain. So yes, biomes, those are going to be the major terrestrial ecosystems characterized by climate and geography. Plants and animals are going to be adapted to living under certain environmental conditions, and they tend to repeat wherever the temperature and precipitation are the same. Finally, these terrestrial ecosystems is that they support characteristic types of animals, but those animals might migrate from one biome to the next depending on whatever their needs happen to be. So animals can also breed in one biome and then spend the rest of their lives in another biome. So we're going to move on to studying the main features of the major biomes, beginning with the tundra. There are two tundra regions that we are going to be talking about, starting off with the Arctic tundra. The Arctic tundra encircles the Earth just south of the polar seas in the northern hemisphere. This biome is going to be characterized by being very cold and very dark most of the year. So the temperature is cold. There's very little sunlight. There's also going to be very little precipitation. This biome has extremely long, cold, harsh winters and very, very short summers. But it is going to cover about 20% of the Earth's land surface. So it is, by land mass, one of the very largest biomes that we have. It's a massive amount of the Earth's land surface. Now, because there's very little rainfall, it could be considered a desert, but the melting snow actually creates areas with pools and bogs in the summer. So even though there's very, very little precipitation, it still is a very damp region because the summer sun does melt and create sort of flooding in certain regions. However, one thing I'd like to point out is that only the topmost layer of soil thaws. Underneath is the permafrost. The permafrost is a layer that never thaws, which results in very poor drainage. Because of that poor drainage and because that permafrost never thaws, we will not find trees in this area. The growing season is too short with a nearly year-round winters, and the roots can't penetrate that permafrost. So a cold frozen layer of soil that never thaws is going to leave a very shallow, boggy soil in the summer. It's way too shallow for trees to anchor themselves. So we're not going to find trees in this tundra. Instead, we're going to find lots of short grasses and mosses. So this is what the tundra looks like. So despite minimal tree growth, there's still going to be a lot of organisms found in the tundra. In the summer, the ground is going to be covered with short grasses and mosses. There's also going to be dwarf woody shrubs in lieu of trees, which flower and grow in the summer season. There are a few animals that live in the Arctic tundra year-round. What we're going to see is because there's very little vegetation year-round, and there's also very, very long, cold, dark winters, we're going to see that most of the year-round animals are going to be small rodents like lemmings that can stay burrowed under the snow, nice and warm. We're also going to find musk ox that can survive the long winters by conserving energy with their thick coats and short, squat bodies. We'll also see things like snowy owls, lynx, voles, Arctic fox, snowshoe hares, smaller, leaner carnivores that can survive on the rodents, can survive on the herbivores and the primary consumers that are found there. Now, here's the interesting thing about the tundra. Yes, we're going to have very few organisms that can survive year-round. However, because of the warm, short summers and all the vegetation that's found, we're actually going to see a lot of migration during the summer season. So the caribou in North America and reindeer in Asia and Europe are actually going to migrate up for the summer months. So because the main herbivores are large caribou, reindeer, things like that, since they are migrating north, we're going to find that the secondary consumers, the carnivores, are also going to be primarily migratory. So either our carnivores are going to be owls and lynx, small, sleek carnivores that feed on small, sleek herbivores like small rodents, or if we do have larger herbivores, they are going to be followed by larger carnivores like wolves. Now, of course, because we have large herbivores like caribou and reindeer, it's going to take a pack of wolves. So we're going to find that our secondary consumers are going to be primarily pack hunting animals that are going to require several of them in order to take down a caribou. So all of the species that live in this tundra have adaptations for living in the short summers and long cold winters. Whether their adaptation is that they're small and lean and don't require a lot of vegetation and can hibernate really well, or their adaptation is that they're big and they're strong and they can migrate and they can handle the really long trek for that migration. Ultimately, all of those organisms are adapted for the specific climate of the tundra. So the next region that we're going to talk about is the coniferous forests. So now we're moving down from the poles. The coniferous forests are going to have long, cold, snowy winters with warm, humid summers. So cold winters, warm summers, and a reasonable amount of precipitation. We tend to see cone-bearing trees. And there are 3 different types of coniferous forests that we're going to talk about: the taiga, montane, and the temperate forests of the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to start off with the taiga. The taiga is going to extend all around the world in the northern part of North America and Eurasia. These are going to be the coniferous forests with cone-bearing trees, things like fir, spruce, pine. The trees are going to be extremely well adapted to the cold. Both the leaves and the bark have thick coverings. So they have thick waxy coverings to help protect them from the cold. The leaves are actually needles. Those needle-shaped leaves, or those needle-like leaves, those are the leaves. The needle shape makes them actually very, very strong and able to withstand heavy snowfalls. Now there's not a lot of surface area for picking up sunlight. If you've ever seen like a needle leaf as opposed to a maple leaf, of course, the needle leaf is going to be smaller and less efficient for soaking up sunlight because it's got less surface area. However, it can it can stay year-round. It can stay year-round, and it can support a lot of snow. There's not a ton of sun in the long, cold, snowy winters anyway. So the adaptation is not necessarily for soaking up so much sun, but it's going to be for surviving and soaking up sun year-round. So we're going to see that those leaves make them able to withstand the heavy snowfalls. There's also going to be a limited understory. There's going to be very limited vegetation beneath the trees because these trees are so dense. We have leaves all the way down, which means they're going to soak up every bit of sun that comes through, that filters down through those leaves. So there's actually going to be very limited understory down beneath these trees. There's going to be a lot of moss and lichens, but very few bushes, shrubs, and grass. Now, what we are going to see in terms of the animals, we're going to see birds. Since our climate is adapted for these coniferous trees, we're going to see that our primary consumers are going to be adapted for these trees as well, meaning we're going to see lots of birds that harvest the seeds of the conifers. We're going to see bears that fish in the streams. We're going to see deer and moose and beavers and muskrats, there we go, words are hard, muskrats that tend to live around the rivers and the streams, where there's going to be plenty of vegetation and lots of food available. So because we have larger animals like that, we're going to see that the carnivores, or the secondary consumers, are going to again be pack animals like wolves that can take down and hunt down the larger prey. So that's the taiga. The montane region is simply going to be the mountainous coniferous forests. So these are going to be less about latitude and more about altitude. So the montane regions of the coniferous forests are going to be found anywhere that we have significantly high altitude. The temperate rainforest is also known as the old-growth forest of the Pacific Northwest. This is going to be running along the northwest coast of Canada and the U.S. This is called the rainforest because of the extreme amounts of rainfall and very rich soil. This type of environment has produced the tallest conifer trees in existence, including the coastal redwoods. This type of forest is also called an old growth forest because some of the trees are over 800 years old, and a lot of the animals that we're finding there are going to be, like with all the coniferous forests, squirrels, lynx, numerous species of amphibians, reptiles, and birds. We're going to pause there, and we'll pick up with temperate deciduous rainforests in our next video.